Nearly unanimous vote. The final vote, 427-1, just hours after some Epstein survivors gathered at the Capitol to rally support. So next step, the Senate, and then on to the White House for the president to sign this into law if it passes that chamber. The president now says he'll do that in a surprising political pivot after months of resistance to backing the bill. Joining us now is our chief Capitol Hill correspondent, Ryan Nobles. And Ryan, this vote just seconds ago now takes this one step closer to reality for the survivors and other advocates who have been fighting for it. The question had been just how many Republicans would get on board. The answer appears to be all but one.
That's right, Hallie. And as this resolution was officially gavelled and signed through the House of Representatives, there were cheers in the gallery just a few feet from where I'm standing. And we're told that there were survivors of the Epstein discharge petition, as it's called, came to be. The discharge petition is a maneuver that rank and file House members can use to bring a piece of force this to the floor. But once it became a reality that this was something that House members were going to be forced to vote on, Republicans quickly came around and decided that it was responsible and smart for them to vote yes, including the Speaker himself. Today, though, he did hold a press conference and discuss his issues with the bill. He is concerned that it doesn't do enough to that they've written the bill in a way that would solve and deal with all these issues that the Speaker has. He's asking the Senate to change it, Hallie, and of course that is the next big question we have. That's right. How the Senate will deal with this, and we could find that out here in the next hour or so when the Senate convenes.
Explain that, Ryan, because you now have the top Senate Democrat, Chuck Schumer, suggesting that he will try to bring this to the floor. He will try to take action, possibly in the next several hours here tonight. Of course, it would need Republican support. What are you hearing from that side of the Capitol?
Well, there's two ways that this could go once it reaches the an arduous process that this resolution could take. If they take the route that Speaker Johnson is suggesting, it could delay the passage and the release of these files indefinitely. So Speaker Johnson is asking for a long list of amendments to be added to this bill. With voting yes, it would then have to come back here to the House for another vote before it made it to the president's desk. This doesn't seem to be something that most rank and file Republicans want to deal with right now because it keeps the story in the forefront. It's something that we'll continue to ask questions about. The other alternative they have is that they can do as Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has suggested and just bring the bill to the floor this afternoon and vote on it, perhaps even by a vehicle called unanimous consent, where they just put it on the floor and say, is everybody okay with this? And if no one objects, the bill passes. That would prevent Republicans from having to deal with the continued questions about this, and it would also send the bill to President Trump's desk as soon as this evening. Now, we don't know which way the Senate Majority Leader John Thune wants to go as it relates to this package. He's deflected all questions about the Epstein saga from the very beginning, saying that this resolution was just a hypothetical issue because the Senate or the House had yet to pass it. It is no longer a hypothetical issue. It is something he's going to have to deal with. And Hallie, we've talked to many Republicans already on the Senate side who said that the bill should come to the floor and that they plan to vote yes. So much like how we saw it play out here in the House, if it makes it to the floor, it will absolutely get at least the 60 votes necessary. The question right now is in the hands of John Thune as to when the bill could make it to the floor and how quickly there'll be a vote.
Ryan, I'm going to ask you to stand by for just a moment while we bring in our senior White House correspondent, Garrett Haake. And Garrett, we referenced the president's surprising reversal on this after months of resistance to backing the bill, saying this week that he would green light the GOP to back it, that he would, in fact, sign it into law. But there's another piece to this, too, right, which is some lawmakers suggesting that the president could avoid the Senate vote altogether. He could avoid having Congress manage this by simply directing the DOJ to release the files now himself. He was pressed about this today, right?
Yeah, that's right. And he really didn't answer. And this has been one of the interesting kind of riddles at the heart of this. I mean, this is a president who's never been shy about urging his attorney general or Department of Justice to take specific actions in a way previous presidents would not have. Here, there's a very clear action he could have taken if we take his words at face value, that he wants to see transparency here and wants to put this issue behind him, and could simply pick up the phone or use his social media platform to call for the complete release of the relevant files, a step he has chosen not to take. Yesterday, though, he did say in the Oval Office, when I asked him, that he would sign this bill if it got to his desk, clearing up any confusion about whether he wants to see it simply pass the House and get bogged down in the Senate. To Ryan's point, that could potentially happen as early as today, but that's not to say that the files would suddenly come spilling out into the open then, even with the legislative path cleared and a presidential signature. Hallie, there's still a pretty lengthy process potentially here before we'll see the meat of what could be millions of different types of digital and physical files in the government's possession.
Ryan, let me go back to you here, because one of the things that we covered earlier today, this rally at the base of the Capitol involving not just the lawmakers behind this bipartisan bill, but also Epstein abuse survivors. You're seeing some of that video here, who have been pushing now for months. And in my conversations with several of these survivors, one of the things I heard again and again was that they felt like at every turn they were told that what they were trying for, the release of these files, was impossible. Now, here they are, one step closer to getting what so many of them say they want to see, which is full transparency, full accountability. They have been having, they've been talking to members of Congress. They've been releasing PSAs to try to get public support for this bill. And they believe that Americans are on their side when you look at the polling, when you look at the numbers on this.
And Hallie, I think they're right. And I think that's evidenced by the vote total you saw here. I think, what Republican leadership has tried to say over the past few months as this debate has emerged over whether or not this resolution should pass, that it's somehow Democrats that have been the ones pushing it. And certainly Democrats have gotten involved in this, and Democrats have in many ways put pressure on Republicans to get this bill to the floor. But it's really been the Republican base, fueled in many ways by the stories of these survivors, that has gotten us to this point. It has been Republicans who are having their offices get countless phone calls from their constituents demanding accountability for the Epstein files. It was something that Donald Trump ran on in his campaign for president in this last election cycle. So this has become somewhat of an organic movement that really crosses party lines. And it's really been these heartfelt, courageous stories from the survivors of this saga that have kind of driven that. And when Speaker Johnson today talks about his desire to protect the innocent folks that have been caught up in this controversy, it comes at the same time that these survivors just earlier today passionately made the case that this resolution needs to be passed because this information needs to get out and that it's been covered up for far too long. So that's why many of them were in the gallery to watch this vote take place because they feel so strongly about it. But you're very right, Hallie, and you've talked to these survivors more than anyone I know. The idea that they would get to this stage where they would see such an overwhelming vote, given how long the atrocities of Jeffrey Epstein have been covered up, it certainly must be a remarkable day for them. Still a long way to go before they get the full accountability they're looking for. But this is a pretty miraculous step given where this controversy was even 5 years ago.
To that point, Ryan, I'm thinking about one conversation I had earlier today with an Epstein survivor who said this is really the starting point now with a potentially long road ahead. Garrett, let me go back to you here for a moment, because President Trump talked about his relationship, his association with his one-time friend Jeffrey Epstein just in the last couple of hours at the White House in the Oval Office. Let me play that.
As far as the Epstein files I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right.
The president has repeatedly been frustrated, Garrett, by questions that he would take from reporters, from others about the Epstein case, in part, as he's described it, as a hoax, in part because he fears, it sounds like, based on his comments, that it overshadows other of his presidential priorities, Garrett.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the president told me yesterday, that he sees this as a distraction from the things that he's been able to accomplish in this second term in particular. He compares it unfavorably, as you might imagine, to the Russia investigation that was a cloud over his first term as a similar kind of issue in the sense that he says, he believes he has done nothing wrong and that no amount of information that comes out seems to satisfy the people who are critical of him on this issue. He has gone on to say that he believes this is more of a problem for Democrats and has gone so far onto it that he's encouraged his Department of Justice to open any investigations into Democrats who might have been involved with Jeffrey Epstein or who might be mentioned in some way in the files. Hallie, that obviously creates another problem for his Department of Justice and his FBI, which said publicly in July that there is no information in these files that could predicate even opening any additional investigations.
And Ryan, in the bill, there is a provision that would allow the DOJ to withhold certain pieces of information that would be relevant to an active investigation. That seems to be one of the big question marks, right? If this does pass, Ryan, how the release of these files actually does happen.
Yeah, it does really feel like Speaker Johnson is kind of splitting hairs with the language in this resolution as part of his reluctance to fully embrace it. One of my colleagues today in the press conference with Speaker Johnson actually read the resolution to him and point by point went through how each one of these things that he's concerned about is addressed in the resolution. And then he went into further minutia into the bills and how they could potentially be interpreted. It does give the Department of Justice pretty wide purview in terms of protecting these things that he's concerned about, in terms of redacting the names of potential victims and not getting in the way of potential investigations. The laundry list goes on and on. I think what frustrates the survivors so much is that every single time they think they're on the verge of some sort of transparency when it comes to this issue, another roadblock is thrown in the way. And often it's a roadblock under the guise of some sort of protection or some way to prevent this process from moving forward. They're just sick of the delays at this point. And I think they would prefer to have some sort of pressure put on the Department of Justice to reveal this information sooner rather than later. And I also think there is a bit of a concern from the survivors that it's not necessarily just about people that were directly complicit in crimes. There is a belief that anybody involved with Jeffrey Epstein on some level deserves some sort of recognition as a result of that. And we're already seeing that happen. Prince Andrew, for instance, is somebody that has really kind of fallen from public grace as a result of it. So there's a lot that the survivors want that they feel like they have not been getting from Congress.
And the fallout from the Epstein controversy continuing to grow. Ryan Nobles, Garrett Haake, thank you both very much as we conclude our NBC News special report after that landslide vote in the House of Representatives. We'll have much more ahead on your local station, over on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com. We'll see you tonight on Nightly News. I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for watching.